איך היא עושה את זה מתוך ה...
היי.
היי. דלית בדיוק היה לה אזעקה.
מאחר וזה מוקלט כבר, אז אולי כדאי שלא נרבה בדיבור.
זה כבר מוקלט? לא ראיתי. Sorry. I stand corrected. כרגלי. את מפעילה את ההקלטה, ליאורה? אז היא יצאה כנראה לשנייה. טוב.
Hello, Geshe-ma.
Hello? Can you hear
Please
me?
read
Hi,
the chat.
everybody.
Please read the chat.
Can you hear
Can
me?
you?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay.
Dalit is now in the shelter. I'll try to make you a co-host if I can.
Okay.
No, I'm not sure.
It's
That
recorded.
give me the option. No, I'm afraid it doesn't give me the option to make you co-host, even though I am co-host. But we
Okay.
thought that it might be possible. So
I sent you a request. Maybe if you click on there somewhere. Multiple presenters can share, it says.
But it says
yeah.
Wangmo has been assigned as a co-host, so it should be all right.
Yep. I think I'm okay. Let me just, yep. Yep, this should work. Great. Okay. So let's leave it that way, just to be sure we won't lose it again. And start with the meditation. Just a sec. Yeah, let's start. And as always, Buddha Shakyamuni is right in front of you, appearing as a fully ordained monk. And being an embodiment of all your lamas and all the enlightened qualities. At the same time, think that you're surrounded by every sentient being. waiting for us to help them. So the first step is to connect to them through affectionate love. By remembering that our differences are minor and outweighed by everything we have in common. And so generate a deep sense of fondness and tolerance, combined with intense care or concern for sentient beings. And let's remember what's the problem in the life of sentient beings. Having the 5 aggregates, the contaminated aggregates. And therefore experiencing constant problems, fear, worry, and so on. So let's generate great compassion, which is a mental factor that has once again that sense of closeness, affection for sentient beings, but at the same time sincerely wishes for them to be free from all their faults and limitations, and wishes to help them to overcome these faults and limitations, that aspires to protect them. And that aspiration then grows stronger, grows into the altruistic attitude that's now determined to do whatever is necessary to help sentient beings overcome all their faults and limitations. And then based on these different states of mind, let's generate the mind of enlightenment that, driven by great love and compassion, sincerely aspires to become fully enlightened in order to be of greatest benefit to every sentient being. And it is with that aspiration that we also continue to study the Precious Garland. And so while holding the visualization, let's recite the prayers, the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Sorry, you don't have the text. I forgot that it needs to be me who displays it, but anyway, okay. Now, there is some change. I don't know whether you know about it. I thought about how to structure the class. I mean, I rethought it. I thought, but well, first of all, I mentioned Gyaltsabje's commentary on the Precious Garland, which is not very long. And I decided to translate that as well and add it to the handout. Now, I haven't had the time to translate his commentary from the very beginning. So there's an introductory part. Then there are the first two verses. I haven't translated the commentary on these verses yet, but then starting from verse number 3, I added Gyaltsabje's text. And you'll see it's pretty short. It's not very long. But then in order to also explain that and give more explanations on the Precious Garland, I decided to, well, let's see, for the time being, not start with the Lambrim. I think we started doing that during the pandemic, and somehow I felt it was important that you get access to the Lambrim, etc. But actually, if you read it on your own, it's pretty straightforward, and it just gives me more time to go through the text. So let's try this. Let's try and see how it works. And you can always send your reflections on that, like your feedback. If you don't agree, you can send it to me and then I'll make a decision later on. But yeah, so let's see today how it works. I also want to answer some questions. I always find it important to address your questions and take some time with that. Yes? Okay. Is that okay to answer? Jimmy, did you want to say something?
It's not so important, but we just have a Lambrim course going on right now, right here. So I think other people have Lambrim courses too locally, so it's no big deal.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so first of all, yeah, like I said, I want to start with some questions. The first question actually I got was from B. Now, it's in my email, so I'm just going to read it. It's not complicated. She asks, what exactly does it mean to cognize higher rebirth and liberation, since you do not mean to realize, that is, to actualize them? Okay, so cognize. I use the word cognized because, well, maybe I don't remember it correctly, but there's this commentary by Geshe Tekchok, Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. That's, as far as I know, the only English commentary available on the text we're studying right now by Kensho Jamba Tekchok. So in here, I seem to remember that he uses the word cognize, cognition of. Yeah, I think he uses that. But anyway, in Tibetan, there are quite a few words which express the idea of knowing something, of cognizing something, realizing. Okay, in English, that's a little confusing because in English, the word to realize can mean to actualize, and it can mean to understand, to know, to comprehend. But what does that mean? I mean, usually we don't use them interchangeably that much, but actually, like if you think about it, like the example I gave last time about my own anger, for instance, I know as an example, I got angry yesterday, or I was peaceful yesterday, or whatever you want to. I mean, I know 100% that that happened because that's an emotion, like anger, for instance. It's, and here I'm not talking about subtle anger, but the kind of a coarse anger. I just know I got angry, even if I had a smile on my face and no one believes it. So here, what do I know? What do I cognize? Cognize also has the meaning of being aware and perceiving, but it also means to actually incontrovertibly know. So in the context here, the way I used it is to know. Now, when I say I have anger, what is it that, or had anger yesterday, what is it that I know? What is it that I cognize? Well, first of all, the existence of that anger. I know yesterday it was there. So there was anger. But that's not all that I understand. I also understand the main characteristics of that anger. What distinguishes the mental factor of anger from another mental factor, such as attachment? So it has kind of its main characteristics that are usually expressed by a definition. So I know these main characteristics. That's how I can distinguish it from other types of mind or other types of mental factors. Now, this is the same with regard to, well, here, for instance, high rebirth. I know that they exist. If I realize, if I've understood, and I never use the word to realize in the context of actualizing. I never, because it gets too confusing. There's a Tibetan word, tokpa, and I use realize usually to translate that. So to translate that term in the sense of, for instance, like when you say the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So that knows emptiness, that cognizes emptiness, that understands emptiness, that knows emptiness. And basically, when you know, cognize, understand, and like I'm saying, I'm using them as synonyms, then it means you know their existence in general. There is an exception because emptiness, when you know emptiness, you don't necessarily know its existence because emptiness is an ultimate truth, but the existence of emptiness is a conventional truth. So if you know one directly, you don't know the other one directly with that same mind because you can't know the true truth directly with the same mind, at least not explicitly. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. So other than emptiness, for all other objects, if I know a higher rebirth, what does that mean? I know that they exist and I know their main characteristics. What does it mean to be a higher rebirth? So the main characteristics that distinguish higher rebirth, for instance, from lower rebirth in the lower realms. So if you remember that, so I had anger yesterday. I know it was there. It existed. Or anything else. I saw blue. I know blue existed in this right in front of me. I don't know. There was a blue pencil on my table. I saw that. I remember that. And so that's what it means. I cognized it. You just don't talk like that. You be, I cognized my pencil. Like you say, I saw it, or I know it was there, or I understood it. I mean, understood. You don't really use it for sense objects. I understood it understood the pencil. I mean, we don't use it that way. But anyway, here we're not talking about sense perception. Anyway, what are we talking about? Conceptually understanding, for instance, in this case, higher rebirth and the highest good. They exist. And what are their kind of main characteristics that I need to know in order to know them? So I hope this helps a little bit. If the word cognize is weird or difficult, then maybe in other words, to know the existence, to understand, to realize, but not realize in the sense of actualize. Oh, Sneh, you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Geshe, you also, sorry, I'm interrupting B.
Oh, okay. B, did you also raise? I didn't see B.
Yes, error in my question.
Yes, go ahead, B, please.
In one explanation, you say that it is easier to know the highest good in terms of liberation because it's easier to know emptiness. Emptiness is hidden phenomena, and we can know it by inferential cognizer. But to know higher rebirth, we need to know karma, and karma is a very hidden phenomena.
Yes.
I don't know. Speaking very generally speaking,
Yes.
I know what karma is, although I don't know the intricacy of what leads to what, but I know generally what karma is. In that sense, I know generally what a good higher rebirth is. So what else does it entail here?
Okay. Well, to know karma in general, I agree. To know, for instance, that virtuous actions lead to positive experiences, for instance, that is not extremely hidden, just in general, right? Just virtuous actions lead to pleasant experiences or something pleasant. That is not said to be that difficult. But here we're talking about higher rebirth, not just understanding that there's a great degree of happiness in these realms or that you have many opportunities in terms of Dharma practice, but to fully understand higher rebirth, you need to understand what were the specific causes. So not each cause in all its details, but at least what kind of virtues, so not just virtues in general, but what kind of virtues do you need to accumulate to be reborn in the human realm? What are all the causes you need? So, for instance, also maybe prayers that you recite that are also karmic actions, aspirational karmic actions and so forth.
Well, in that regard, generally is said in the scripture that, I mean, generally speaking, again, you go do the virtuous action, you avoid the non-virtuous action. Generally, that will lead you to a higher rebirth.
That's true. That's true, but that's not.
What else do I need to know for it to know higher rebirth?
What does it mean to know? Did you say that?
Yeah, because generally the scripture has told us what it is that we need to do to get to higher rebirth. So we have information. It seems to be implying something that we are not getting at now in order to know higher rebirth. I suppose in such a way that I don't already know what higher rebirth is.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that the explanation that you just mentioned is not necessarily meant to know higher rebirth, just to believe it's possible. That's actually enough, right? Or to have faith that there are higher rebirth. There's another question by Shmuel. He's got a question in that respect. So I could say, for instance, let's say this much. I don't know whether I'm going to live until the age of, I don't know, 70. But I believe there's a possibility and plan ahead in that way, right? I mean, maybe not so much as a nun, but if you live in the West and you pay into like a pension fund, right? You don't know whether you're going to live up to. There's a possibility, but you prepare accordingly. Does that make sense? So in the text, it doesn't say you have to know their higher rebirth. It doesn't say that. Having faith in higher rebirth, a kind of faith based on reasoning and so forth, that's already enough to be able to prepare in the right way. But since Buddhism talks a lot about what a mind does, we take something to mind. Something becomes the object of the mind. What does the mind do with it? It could reflect on it. It could have faith in it. It could realize it, like understand it. So there are different things that the mind can do with its object. So we have the capacity to know higher rebirth. We have the capacity, but that's not easy. That's not easy. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's helpful. So it is mentioned in here, not saying it's a prerequisite. It's just saying, well, just by the way, in terms of the sequence of higher rebirth and the highest good, in general, in terms of their arising, first highest rebirth, and so forth. But in terms of if you're curious, can the order be reversed? Well, yes, if you want to realize them, if you want to incontrovertibly know them, then then what is mentioned first, or if you want to explain it, then what you would mention first would be the highest good, because that's easier to understand. It's easier to understand now. But then, of course, what is most difficult, and it's always difficult, this is always extremely difficult, when we talk about the three types of object: obvious, slightly hidden, and very hidden. The first two are pretty straightforward. Okay, so as you said, emptiness, for instance, you need a correct reason, a particular correct reason that establishes for us, for instance, that establishes to the person who applies this reason that phenomena lack inherent existence or are impermanent. So then you'll know after that, once you've applied the reasoning, you did all the analysis, at some point you realize that. But with very subtle phenomena, it's like the subtle working of karma. Honestly, that's what the texts very clearly say. The subtle working of karma, with all its nitty-gritty details, you can only know when you become, you can know, but it is but on the basis of an inferential cognizer through belief, as it's usually called. I didn't use that term, but it's this, it's a inferential cognizer that is based on a reliable text. But honestly, how much do you really understand? Even you've got all the sutras of the Buddha and you've understood they're reliable. How much do you really understand the subtle working of karma? You understand a little better than just, okay, good deeds lead to good experiences. You know more than that, but not the nitty-gritty details. I mean, really, that you can only know when you're Buddha. So to me, this is not very satisfactory. They say, yes, you can know, but then again, not all the way. I mean, how much can you really know? It's like all the details only a Buddha can know, right? Okay, so this is a very difficult topic. You debate it a lot. It comes up a lot during certain topics that you study, but I've never really received a satisfactory answer to that. And I don't think other people have either. But to get back to your question, as far as I understand, so you can know higher rebirth. You can know there is the human realm, for instance, which is considered to be a higher rebirth. So just knowing a human existence doesn't qualify us for us to know it is a higher rebirth, right? So what do you need to know? That there's a certain amount of happiness and certain opportunities, plus have a sense, what kind of causes did you need? What kind of virtues? So to have a sense of what these virtues are, what these virtues have to be. But it's difficult. I don't know how to put it in words. I mean, I'm just following what is said in the text. And in the end, there's always going to be a new debate.
Okay.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, but just we'll get to it. We'll get to it again. Well, actually, I said a little bit more about this in the text, and maybe, hopefully, it'll become a little clearer. Yeah. So it's, like I said, a constant subject of debate. Yeah. Okay, Sneh, you also wanted to say something?
Yeah, just on the question just brought up a thought, because you said part of the definition of cognizer is to know the object incontrovertibly.
Yes.
How do you establish that? Like, how do you establish the incontrovertibility?
Yes.
May know. Yeah.
Okay, so as I said last time, for instance, I mentioned the same example today. Like, I was angry yesterday, right? And you come along and you say, no, you weren't. You give me all these really clever reasons for why I wasn't angry, right? And so no matter what you say, you won't sway me. You won't convince me of the opposite, because I know. Whereas I'm not, I kind of think I was angry, but if I didn't know, like, let's say I don't know, I'm not 100% sure, or I'm convinced, but I haven't known yet, you could actually convince me of the opposite, right? So this can apply to other things as well. For instance, impermanence. I haven't realized impermanence. So I'm 100% convinced at this point, but then you or someone else give me all these reasons saying, oh no, but there are times when things don't change, right? I could be convinced. So I haven't incontrovertibly known because there's room for doubt to arise. Does that make sense?
It does, but I always wonder, like, putting aside our own subjective experience, which only we can speak to, but let's say we commonly have, and this is a very, whatever, difficult subject, but like, when does life begin, right? Because so much of the issue is like, when is it okay to have an abortion? Like, when does life actually begin? And there's so much discussion. So it's like, when you have like you have to come to a common agreed upon definition or idea of what is really blue or what is, then I think like what makes something incontrovertible, like, as a collective thing, then it's so complicated. Like, I can say, oh yeah, I think, life begins, whatever, it's 5 months, and somebody's like, no, it begins at the moment of conception. And there's so many other topics like that. And I always wonder, like, by whose definition is it incontrovertible?
All right. Sneh, what you're doing, this is very interesting. You're going into ultimate analysis. Do you notice? Kind of thinking, well, what does it actually mean? So let's take a maybe a little easier abortion. Of course, there's this whole moral aspect, but let's just take, what is a religion? Is Buddhism a religion or not, right? So of course, if I don't agree that religion means to have a creator God, another person says you need to believe in a creator God, then one says Buddhism is a religion, the other one says it isn't. But in the end, they just apply the term differently. So this is more about how you apply a term, what is the definition that you've decided on, and then from then onwards you call it that, right? But the ones you've decided on, that is a religion or not, or this is a pencil or not, right? You may call it something different, but we all agree in the end, okay, we call this a pencil. Then we can say it's in the room or not. Then we can be very certain about. So of course we can go into like, is it or is it not, and what makes it a pencil? That's going into ultimate analysis. But once on a conventional level, we have decided pencil is this, not pencil is that. So we've all agreed it doesn't exist in and of itself as a pencil. No, it required our input, our labeling this pencil and so forth. But once we've done so, we can say it exists conventionally and then decide whether it exists or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then of course decide, I can be a little nasty here, for instance, right? I chose the anger because if I choose the pencil, it's a little bit more tricky because how do I know I'm not hallucinating? Right? That's different with the anger. I don't know. Can I hallucinate? I could be dreaming I had anger. Okay, that's also a possibility. So here it's a little bit like, how do I know? But in the end, I think if we are of sound mind, we generally don't hallucinate, and we know when it was a dream and it wasn't. So, unless I was intoxicated or something, but let's just take an ordinary kind of day. I know I was angry or not. I know there's a pencil or not. That's it. Right?
Okay.
And again, the moment you analyze, of course, things become a little less clear because they aren't as clear. They aren't as solid and concrete as they may appear. But we're now talking within the context of how it appears as very clear and concrete, and we move on a conventional level here. Does that make sense?
It does, and it also just is a good reminder to me that when I have these discussions is to first start with an agreement. Like, let's all agree that there is a pencil, and then
Right. Before we do this, I mean, we can,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, you see, that's why when we study debate, what do we call the study of debate? We call it the study of definitions. In Tibetan, you literally say, I'm studying definitions, which is quite interesting because that's really the basis for our study. First, you define things. because if we use the word differently, and that means we have different definitions for the same term, it's useless. Our discussion is going to be useless. Now, first we agree on a definition. What does it mean to be permanent, impermanent, form, non-form? And then we discuss, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So great. These were important questions from all of you. I have one further question. Shmuel asked a question. Where is it? Yep. Can you see it? Can you see the questions? Can you read them? Am I still sharing the
No,
screen?
you're not
No,
sharing.
we cannot.
Okay. All right, I'll just read it. What are some reasons that can help one generate some level of faith, not necessarily a realization in the law of karma? Okay. That's important. So what are some reasons that can help us generate some level of faith? First of all, before faith arises, we can at least allow the possibility, right? At least the possibility. So if we allow for the possibility, that can already help us to live in accordance with the law of karma. As I said, I gave the example, I don't know whether I live up to the age of 70. I have faith that it's possible, but it's not like I have faith that I will live until I'm 70. I don't. But still, since I allow the possibility, I may eat in a particular way, so I won't die of a heart attack before I reach that age, and so forth. Does that make sense? So even the possibility would allow us to live according to the law of karma. But of course, faith is better, and even better would be an understanding. Okay, so just that. This is not the answer. It's not the answer to his question yet, but I just thought about it this afternoon and thought it was maybe helpful to mention this. Now, what are some reasons? The problem is without some sense of past and future lives, I don't know how you could understand karma. I mean, we could, of course, discuss karma by saying, well, for instance, in this lifetime, if you do something to harm another person, you don't really feel peaceful and happy at that time. So it shows harming someone doesn't give you inner peace. But the result of harming someone, the resultant feeling of guilt possibly, or just a lack of inner peace, kind of feeling disturbed or whatever whichever way you feel, that's not the karmic result of this action. I mean, it could be, but usually a karmic, so there's some time between the karmic cause and the karmic result. Just as there's some time between a seed and a tree. You know, it takes some time for the seed to grow into the tree, to use this analogy. So similarly, usually they say when a karmic cause is accumulated and you feel bad a moment later, if it was a negative kind of karma, that's not the karmic result. It's a result of that karmic action, but it's not the karmic result of that action. It's the karmic result of another action. But since there's a correlation, this other karma could have ripened as a result of this previous. No, I should say that differently. If I harm someone right now, let's say I insult someone, and a moment later I feel bad. Feeling bad is not necessarily, or very unlikely, the result of insulting this person. It's very likely to be the result of maybe in a previous life, accumulated karma of insulting someone. But it got triggered by that new karma I just accumulated. So therefore, the insult the insult that I just performed, that will have a karmic result probably in the next life. Like I said, it's not always the case that a karma ripens in the next life, but it's very likely. Which is why to have faith in karma, we also need to consider the possibility of past and future lives. Basically, do start with that. very difficult. So some reasoning that I personally find effective. So I'm just going to share this with you. If you apply mindfulness, in particular mindfulness in the together with introspection. So usually when we talk about mindfulness, in the way that is nowadays, well, it's also described in the Theravada tradition. It's usually more than just the factor of like recollection or mindfulness, keeping on the object, being attentive. It's also a type of introspection. Now, when you have that kind of introspection, when it comes to your own mind. So at some time, if you start to practice the Dharma, you pay more attention to your own mind. So you become more mindful of your own mind. You apply this introspection and you get to know your own mind better. And you get to see that your state of mind right now is very much determined by your previous state of mind. You go to sleep with you're cranky, you know, you're like, or you're moody and whatever. You wake up with a certain state of mind. Or something happened to you, someone upset you. If you forget a moment later, it doesn't affect you. But if you don't, then that continuation. So you really get a strong sense of that continuum of mind, how of earlier moment of your mental continuum, or later moments of your mental continuum were created by earlier moments. In interaction with other people, of course, there are also external aspects and so forth. But the point is, that the mind is always preceded by another moment of mind. When we study for an exam, for instance, we're not going to take lots of pills and you know, mainly focus on external physical aspects in order to become prepared, in order to prepare ourselves for the exam. No, we use our mind to be prepared, to then have the mental knowledge to take the exam. So in that way, it becomes pretty obvious that the mind needs to be preceded by a former moment. It becomes so, like, how else would it be, right? But for some reason, if we don't believe in past lives, for instance, we get to this point where it no longer makes sense. The first moment of my consciousness was not caused by a former moment of consciousness, but I don't know, by some cells, by some body cells, my parents' chromosomes or whatever. That actually doesn't make sense. So to think along these lines can be helpful, but you have to really spend more time with your own mind to get a stronger sense how one mind gives rise to the next. And then also reflect on when you were younger. I mean, if you have memories of when you were younger, how many things are there that you haven't learned from your parents, but you have this incredible like for something and no one ever taught it and taught this to you, and you don't know where it comes from, but it's just there. Or you connect to another person and it seems like you've known them. No one else feels that way. So you have this connection with people, with countries, with cultures, and like, where's that come from? I mean, why was I drawn to Dharamsala? I mean, like, my whole family think I'm pretty crazy. I was pretty crazy, you know, to arrive. I mean, like, what is she doing? I was so off for everyone. Everyone in my family, everyone, they live still in the same radius. I mean, it's not like Americans, West Coast, East Coast. No, no, no. In the radius of like 10 kilometers, everyone still lives, but I'm the crazy weird one, right? So the thing is, I felt that strong. There was some connection there. You think about this, and I'm sure we all have different examples, especially when it comes to the Dharma, which comes from a totally different culture, and so forth. It really, there's no other explanation than the mind was there before. The mind has existed before in a different body, in a different environment, but it was there. And then it makes sense. Okay, so then why do I have these experiences? Why do I sometimes have similar experiences? There's like a pattern, which of course it accounts for karma, sometimes magnify. First of all, karma is one of the qualities of karma, that it magnifies. So one karmic cause can have many different results, but also habits lead me to accumulate similar actions again and again. And if I've accumulated them time and again in my last life, I have similar experiences in this life. Makes sense. And cause and effect is all around us. If you have a garden, you're aware of cause and effect. If you go to school, you're aware of cause and effect. Like whatever we do is affected by the law of cause and effect. So really everything, when you look at science, when you cook, I mean, the quality of your flour is going to affect what kind of cake you're going to get in the end, right? The egg is rotten or not, etc. So in every situation, whatever we do has a consequence. So likewise, if every action that I accumulate has an impact on the people around me and so forth, why do I assume they totally get lost? And why do I assume it's totally random that one thing happens to me suddenly, but that doesn't happen to someone else? Why am I so inconsistent that when I garden, everything is pretty clear cause and effect, but when something happens to me, no, that's just random. Do you see what I'm saying? So it requires a lot of thinking. First of all, about the mind that I just mentioned, and then about the law of cause and effect. Karma, the law of karma, is just one aspect of the law of cause and effect. The law of karma is basically saying that a volitional mental action leads to a mental experience. It's not so much about the external circumstances, it's our mental experience of that. It's mainly that. So it leads to this mental experience. And thus, this mental experience is not random. Why is it not random when I have a flower in my garden, when the cake has a certain taste? None of that we in any way accept to be random. How? Why would I say, how could I actually come to the conclusion that my experiences, they just happen and they have no cause, right? So it just needs some thinking, like think about the different types of laws of cause and effect. The gardening law of cause and effect, the scientific law, like all the different aspects of particular causes giving rise to particular results. And when you have a really strong sense of how that is working and how it's all interconnected and how sometimes a minor cause can affect lots of other phenomena and have a great result, well, then take it to volitional actions and think again. And I think then it becomes clear, how could it be any other way? Does that make sense? Shmuel, I can't see you right now. Let me just check. Shmuel, does that make sense? Or does it answer that a little bit at least? Still thinking?
Yeah, still thinking. I need to
Okay.
think of it, I guess.
Yeah, think about it. That's good. All right. Okay. Anyway, that's enough for today on that. All right. Now I'm going to open the text and I then start sharing again. Just a sec. Where's my text? Last time I made a mistake with the date. I should have been last time the 14th of October. Maybe Dalit already changed it today. Anyway, it's the 21st, so I labeled it correctly. Okay, all right, here I've got the text. Now all I need to do is share. How am I going to do this? Oh, share. Okay, I'll send a oh, no, here we go. Okay, great. So now you should be able to see the text. Can you see it? Great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go.
But can you do it bigger?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
there's delete. Great. Okay. Is it too small still?
No, it's okay.
Good. All right, so I'll go to page 31 to show you Gelsubj's text. Because and we don't need to go through everything again. Well, I just wanted to read to you Gelsubj's commentary on verse number 3. We haven't come to verse number 4 yet. I started it, but we're still with verse number 3. Anyway, so first comes the Dharma of higher rebirth. I'll change this again a little bit. The root verse has slightly changed based on what Gyaltsab-je said. So it's one thing to just read Gyaltsab-je and think, okay, understand, versus translating it. And of course, you go into much more detail. And yeah, I came to the conclusion based on what Gyaltsab-je said, I need to change this slightly. There's just a few words that are different. Okay. Now, what is unique about Gyaltsab-je, about Lama Tsongkhapa as well, but that's Gyaltsab-je's expertise, which are dividing a text into different outlines, into different sections, and applying a heading for each section. That is extremely helpful, but initially it can be a little bit confusing because you've got all these numbers here. So you see the numbers, well, as I said, verse number 1 and 2 still need to be explained. And the numbers are just, I tried to number the different outlines. And of course, the numbers will get longer and longer and longer as we go through the text. So I may change the system of numbering it, but for the time being, this is okay. It's just like in the Lamrim, for instance, you have the same numbering. Okay. Anyway, so the presentation of the explanation itself, well, the actual text with verse number 3, the actual text has started. Was 1 and 2 are just introductions. So now the actual explanation is given now of the text. Here, explanation refers to the text itself, the actual text, the actual explanation follows. And it can be divided into 4, as Gyaltsab-je says. So it's all in italics, just to be able to identify the different texts. In bold letters, I have the root text, and then in italics, Gyaltsab-je's text is written in italics. The bold letters are again the root text. Gyaltsab-je also integrated the root text into his commentary, so it's part of the commentary, and just to see which words are from the actual root text. So that's why I wrote them in bold letters. Anyway, so he says the sequence of the 2 dharmas here. First, the 16 dharmas, and I'll explain what they are in a little bit. So the 16 virtuous actions, basically, 16 types of virtuous actions that are the causes of higher rebirth, are explained. First, they are explained. Later, emptiness, the object of the path to the highest good, is presented as it should be practiced. So in other words, what are the main causes to higher rebirth? Well, here 16 virtuous actions are described. The 10 virtues plus 6 more virtuous actions Nāgārjuna explains in verse 8 and 9. 8, 9, and 10. No, 9, 10, and 11. Yeah, I think. Anyway, so these 16 causes give rise to higher rebirth. They're explained first in the text. And then later emptiness, which is the object of the path to the highest rebirth. So we need to realize emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. That is the main cause that leads to the highest good, to liberation and enlightenment. So that is presented afterwards in the way it should be practiced. Why? This is because after attaining successive higher rebirth, we must gradually proceed towards the highest good. And later on, I talked about it from the point of view of the causes. We first need to learn about, we need to practice the causes, and then we can understand emptiness, for instance, and also in terms of the kind of rebirth we take. First, we need to take a higher rebirth in the celestial or human realm, and then can we aim for liberation. So this is what Gyaltsab-je says in a few words. Liberation cannot be achieved in the lower realm existence. We must progress from one higher rebirth to another. In the beginning, simple instructions are given. In the beginning, so we learn about the virtuous actions. So they're simple, relatively simple instructions, and only later, after receiving more complex teachings, here I added this, it's just implied in the Tibetan. So it literally says after receiving teachings, but because previously it talked about simple instructions, what is implied is that they're not simple ones, but more complex ones. So after receiving more complex teachings and maturing one's mind, should the profound meaning of emptiness be explained. It should not be otherwise. Yeah, because if we're not mature enough, if our mind is not ready for it, we may develop wrong views. If the meaning of emptiness is misunderstood, we may reject the law of karma and its results. The fault of abandoning emptiness and falling into the lower realms has been taught. So abandoning emptiness in the sense like, oh, nothing exists, I can do whatever I want. So I'm misunderstanding emptiness, in other words. So you abandon the actual emptiness and come up with nothingness. I mean, the thing is, I don't think you fall into the extreme of nihilism to the extent like nothing exists, I don't exist. I don't think that's what really happens realistically, but nothing matters. Kind of this idea, oh, it's all empty anyway. This other person is not important. Their suffering doesn't really exist. I can just do whatever I want. It could lead to that kind of carelessness. And that, of course, could be potentially dangerous. And as this very text, the Precious Garland, will say later on, I think it's verse 120, ruined by their denial of it, they plummet headlong into the Avicii hell. Anyway, that will be explained. So if it becomes necessary to teach emptiness, it should be explained in a way that promotes understanding without in the least undermining certainty about karma and its results. Okay, I've also explained that in this text, or in this explanation. I gave similar explanation. This is based on what Geshe said. Of course, there's a little bit more explanation than given. I also followed Kensho Champa-Chekcho's text. It's yeah, he makes some really beautiful points, but it's kept quite short. I mean, naturally, you have a book, it can't be that big. I mean, here in our case, there's no plan to print it or anything, so we can go as long as we want. That's why I decide some of the explanations Kensho Champa-Chekchola is giving, I just elaborate on them. Like sometimes he describes a quote, but he doesn't give the quote. He just explains it. So then this will be part of the next verse. For instance, he quotes from the what's it called? 3 principal aspects of the path, without giving the quotation. So I'm going to give the quotation and just so you'll have it. Anyway, so but as I said before, I base it on what Gyatso says, and base it on what Samdo Rinpoche says, and I base it on what Kensho Champa-Chekcho says. So these are the main commentaries I'm following. And I can only encourage you to read this text by Kensho Champa-Chekcho. The text is called Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. All right. Okay, so how far did we get? The sequence of cognition of high rebirth and the highest good. All right, so we got to this part. I explained these 3 categories, extremely important. If you study philosophy, it comes up all the time. This you need to know. And I think most of you probably do. Okay, so let's now look at what does it mean to really understand liberation. Why do you have to know emptiness in order to understand liberation? Again, I don't really remember how far we got last time, but okay, let's see. The fact that the understanding of the highest good is preceded by the realization of emptiness needs to be explained in terms of the 2 types of highest good. Oh yeah, I read that, liberation and enlightenment. So they have to be explained separately. In both cases, you want to really understand liberation, you have to understand emptiness. There's no other way. If you want to understand enlightenment, you have to understand emptiness. But what's so beautiful, if you understand why that is the case, you understand how everything is connected. It gives you a really nice framework based on the Four Noble Truths, based on emptiness. You understand that it's actually, however vast Buddhism is, you can bring it back to really liberation, enlightenment, the Four Noble Truths. It perfectly fits. And we hear it time and again that the Four Noble Truths are a framework, that everything fits in the Four Noble Truths, that they're extremely important. And it's beautiful to have that framework because we don't get lost in all the different ideas. We know how they connect to each other, where they belong to. Okay, anyway, now talk about liberation. Let's look at liberation. Liberation is the cessation of all afflictive obstructions. Of course, here you could debate all afflictive obstructions. So my liberation is the cessation of your afflictive obstructions, because it says all afflictive obstructions. Even in Buddhism and even in Tibetan, you use this terminology, but of course it means to a particular person. So all of your afflictive obstructions, when they're gone, that's your liberation. So liberation is just the absence, the cessation of those. It's not a place. It's not a state of mind. Your mind continues. Your mind continues. Oh, I forgot to answer Jimmy's question. I just realized. Sorry, Jimmy. I'll do it next time. My apologies. I'll do it next time.
Geshe,
Yes, please.
it's not important, the other question, not important. Just I have a question about this one. Is it not
Yes, please.
possible that by eliminating all afflictive obstructions, we also eliminate sentient beings? Because sentient beings are only composed of afflictions and nothing else. So once you eliminate afflictions, you eliminate sentient beings as well, isn't it? Like
Okay.
that?
What does, for instance, Dharmakirti says when he says that the afflictions are only that the faults, the limitation, I mean, the stains, he literally says, but that means the afflictions are not in the nature of the mind. What does he say? What does that mean? If they're not in the nature of the mind.
But that's the Buddha, but the Buddha is not a sentient being. So you eliminate sentient beings, you have a Buddha. So there are no sentient beings left.
Oh, so I mean, okay, so a sentient being, but are they I mean, okay, so every sentient being can become a Buddha, but before you become a Buddha, before you eliminate the cognitive obstructions, do you have to eliminate the afflictive obstructions?
Yeah, and then you kill sentient beings as well, because there's nothing else to them.
But you still have the cognitive obstructions. You see, first you eliminate the afflictive obstructions. Are you a Buddha yet? No, you still have the cognitive obstructions, right?
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah, listening.
No, I'm asking, is that right? I mean, if
true, yes.
So there's the state when you have the cognitive obstructions, you've eliminated the afflictive obstructions. Your mind is still there because it's very much affected by the cognitive obstructions. And then, of course, once you eliminate the cognitive obstructions, then you have the pure mind of a Buddha, and you're no longer a sentient being. Then you are no longer called a sentient being. Yeah, that's right. Does that make sense?
The cognitive obstructions are the arahats, so you have then you only had the arahats left.
Yeah,
that's not a sentient being. That's not a sentient being.
An arhat is still a sentient being. So the way the Tibetan word is used, and here I'm just translating the Tibetan term, semchen, which is usually, in English is called a sentient being. A sentient being is defined as someone whose mind is still affected by any of the obstructions. So whether it's the afflictive ones or the cognitive ones. The afflictive ones can be gone. You're an arhat, but you're still a sentient being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Varda, you're raising your hand.
1 second. I just want to be specific for myself. I think you talked about it last time.
Yes.
You changed the word emotions in afflictive emotions to afflictive obstructions, but the obstructions, there are two, one afflictive and one cognitive. Because
I didn't change afflictive emotions. I don't use the word afflictive emotions. I don't think it's a correct term.
Okay.
Mental afflictions. I use mental afflictions.
Afflictions instead of afflictive emotions?
Yes, I prefer, because not every affliction, not every klesha is an emotion.
Okay.
You see, ignorance, for instance, I wouldn't call ignorance an emotion. Anger, attachment, jealousy, they're emotions, but not every klesha, not every mental affliction is an emotion. That's why I don't like to use the word afflictive emotion.
So what's the difference between afflictive emotions, afflictive obstructions, mental obstructions, and cognitive obstructions? Are mental and cognitive under the parapluie?
Parapluie, I understand.
Under
Yeah.
the parapluie
Yeah.
of mental obstructions?
Okay, let me just find this diagram that I made.
Yeah, I used so many years a certain word, and it got too much.
Yeah. Okay, so look at you. Can you see the diagram? The yeah, what do you call it? Like this illustration here? Mental obstructions, right? You have obstructions in the mind. What page is that? That's on page 18. Yeah. So obstructions. What were the words you asked for? Like, what is the difference between mental obstructions and afflictive? Okay, so you see something that obstructs our mind. Our mind, of course, as we know, its actual nature is the same as that of a Buddha's mind. It's like, take the analogy of water that has been polluted by mud and so forth, but the water is still there. So our mind is just like that. It's like this pure water that is temporarily obstructed. These are called mental obstructions. And there's two types. There are two types of mental obstructions: afflictive obstructions and cognitive obstructions. So you see, this is their relationship. So whatever is an afflictive obstruction is necessarily a mental obstruction. Whatever is a cognitive obstruction is a mental obstruction. However, cognitive obstructions are not afflictive obstructions. And whatever is a mental obstruction doesn't have to be an afflictive obstruction. It doesn't have to be a cognitive one. Right? The relationship is between like human, and then male, female, that doesn't no longer work. I got
it.
Pardon?
I got
existent, permanent, impermanent.
Yeah.
Right? So existent, permanent, impermanent. So existent has a category of phenomena that are permanent, and existent contains or consists of a category of phenomena that are impermanent. Right? Permanent and impermanent are contradictory. And whatever exists is not necessarily permanent. It can also be impermanent. And whatever is impermanent, whatever exists doesn't have to be impermanent. It can be permanent. So here it's a similar kind of relationship. The parapluie, that's the parapluie, right?
Yeah.
That's how you use, right? The mental obstruction is the parapluie. It's like the blanket term.
Yeah, okay.
And then blanket term, and then you have this category, afflictive obstructions. They are also called obstructions to liberation. What they mainly do is they obstruct the mind, they hinder the mind, they prevent the mind from the state of liberation. Cognitive obstructions, although they also obstruct the mind from liberation, but they mainly obstruct the mind from omniscience. So even if you're liberated, actually, you wouldn't really say that the cognitive obstructions obstruct omniscience, because even someone who, cognitive obstruction, because even someone who's liberated, no, what am I saying? I'm not thinking clearly. Forget it. Never mind. So their main kind of function is to hinder you from liberation, and in the case of afflictive obstructions, and then in the case of cognitive obstructions, their main function is to prevent the mind from becoming omniscient, right?
Yeah. Everything fine. Just the word emotions just disappeared. And then I said, how come there's only one sort of obstructions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you see here I just call it the affliction. So I don't use the word afflictive emotion. Yeah, for the reason I said earlier. Okay, great. Elisheva, you're raising your hand. Elisheva?
Yes, thank you. Maybe it's stupid a little bit, but it disturbed my mind.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Can Buddha fall down and hit his button? And what is the meaning of it? And does he died in the same process as we die, as regular people?
No. Can the Buddha actually, like, for instance, stumble and then hurt himself? Okay. Actually, no, there's total control. I mean, the fact that we stumble, for instance, and we hurt ourselves, well, that's not a volunteer. It's not something we do on purpose, or it just happens to us because as a result of a certain karmic action. Of course, there are other causes. We're not careful, we're not attentive, etc. We have a body that is fragile. And all this, the situation we find ourselves in, is because of our mental limitations. Our self-cherishing mind, well, our root ignorance gives rise to a self-centered mind, gives rise to many other states of mind. And these states of mind, they're responsible for the kind of situation we find ourselves in. A situation that is such that our mind is fragile, we can potentially hurt ourselves. A Buddha's mind is free from all that. A Buddha's mind is totally free from negative karma ripening in the form of well, in the way of falling and injuring ourselves and so forth. In fact, there's complete freedom, complete control over which thoughts or which mental states are there, complete control over the body, and most importantly, total dedication to the well-being of others, being totally focused on just that. And so whatever a Buddha does, it's possible that a Buddha manifests stumbling and falling down if it benefits someone. Only then. So when we see, for instance, a Buddha, like, for instance, Buddha Shakyamuni, when we hear the different stories, just seemed like an ordinary person. I mean, well, it's just some of the descriptions. The Buddha just sat there, and then some other people were talking, and then the Buddha went to this place and that place, and someone approached him. So, yeah, appeared as an ordinary human being, but then before long, people realized he wasn't. He just manifested in that way as a person that we could relate to. Because if he manifested in his actual form, we couldn't perceive him. We couldn't perceive a Buddha in the actual form. So it's a bit like, I think of it a bit this way, and then maybe a stupid analogy. But you know, when adults talk to children, they talk in a way in which they can understand. They kind of bend down. So the children, you know, like when you have an adult in front of you that's huge, you know, you can't really see them. So usually they squat. If like an adult who's skillful with children, they squat. They make themselves smaller. And they talk to you like baby language or like children's language that you can understand. So then we can relate to them. This is similar. A Buddha, this greatness of the Buddha, the mind, like the body, we cannot grasp it. So the Buddha comes down to our level, right? Like an ordinary person. And then these things that the Buddha does, they're done for our benefit. When a Buddha passes away, it may look to us, oh, you know, ate the wrong food, got poisoned, and now passed away. No. There's total control. If there's some benefit for people to experience the Buddha's death in that way, that's how the Buddha manifests. Total control. It seems like a fairy tale, but the more you learn about the mind, you more learn about these obstructions, how they keep us in this, you know, with these blinders, with these restrictions. Then it kind of makes sense. When they're gone, all that is possible. But anyway, Elisheva, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great. All right. Got a little bit time left. So let's quickly go back to page. What was it? Page what? Creates a conducive mental foundation. What page?
37.
37. Great. Thank you. Good. All right. Okay. So, yes. Liberation is the cessation of all afflictive obstructions, achievable only through the elimination of the root mental affliction, the ignorance. That's important. So if you want to eliminate the afflictive obstructions, we have to get rid of the root cause. That's what we may focus on, the ignorance that grasps at the inherent or objective existence of phenomena together with its seed. Oh, I read that before. Okay. So that, of course, entails the automatic elimination of all other afflictions. All right. And then, therefore, contaminated karma is halted, and we end cyclic existence, we end suffering. Okay, so first root affliction. In that way, we can eliminate the other afflictions. We automatically eliminate, or we no longer accumulate karma, contaminated karma, and there's no longer suffering. All right. So, but to fully understand what that means, we must understand two processes related to the Four Noble Truths. First of all, the process by which the root ignorance causes suffering. Okay. So the root ignorance causes suffering. This illustrates how the mental afflictions and karma, which are the truth of origin. So root ignorance is also a mental affliction, giving rise to self-centeredness. It's also a mental affliction, gives rise to anger, attachment. All of these are mental afflictions. They then give rise to karmic actions, contaminated karmic action. What's the term we use for those two? The truth of origin. They give rise to cyclic existence and the different kinds of suffering associated with it. Truth of suffering. All right. That's one process we need to understand. The second process is by which the direct realization of emptiness, so realizing emptiness, experiencing it directly, gives rise to liberation. Okay, so this demonstrates that the meditative equipoise, that mind that directly experiences emptiness, which takes time to cultivate. First, you conceptually realize emptiness, etc. But, well, first, having done that, then eventually you realize emptiness directly. That's called the truth of the path. It leads to the elimination of afflictive obstructions, called truth of cessation. So these, we need to understand the first two truths and the second two truth in that way. So just briefly, the process of the root ignorance causing suffering. Okay, first you have the root ignorance. Okay, so just to get a mental picture, you understand this, but it's important to create this mental image. So the root ignorance, which through its fundamental misconception sets the entire process in motion. What does it cause? The other mental afflictions, such as attachment to ourselves and our own happiness. That's called self-centeredness. And then to the attachment to that which is mine, my friends, and so forth, aversion, etc. All the other afflictive emotions, which then in turn give rise to contaminated karmic actions, body, speech, and mind, that then eventually ripen in the various forms of suffering. Okay, so that's our life. I mean, that's our life. Why do we suffer? Why do we always have experiences again and again of suffering, of actual core suffering? But not just that. Why do we have this limited body? Why do we have a limited mind with very little control as to what happens tomorrow? Even in terms of positive things that happen to us, there's not that much control, very little control. Why? Well, because there are these karmic actions, contaminated, even virtuous karmic actions, but contaminated nevertheless, because of our mental afflictions. And basically because of our root ignorance. With our root ignorance, we can never be totally happy and satisfied. I think it's also one of these things we can understand. Like, do you ever have an hour or like a whole day when everything is just perfect? It's impossible. because of our wrong perception, our misconception, especially of the self, there's always a kind of worry about the self, about mine. It's like some impending problem, or having to gratify the self, or having to protect it. It's constantly in the way. There cannot be true happiness. And of course, this state gives rise to other states which further disturb our peace of mind. So we really need to understand how right now our predicament is that we're controlled by these afflictions, by these mental afflictions. Okay. All right. So I'm trying to get across that don't look at it as just like some kind of theory. Oh, there's this root ignorance over there, maybe in my neighbor's continuum, or just in general, like a floating root misconception, and then mental afflictions. You have to bring it home. You have to really look at your own situation. That's my situation right now. The good news is temporary, but nevertheless, recognize it. Really, on an emotional level, get a sense, oh, this sucks. Okay. Anyway, so we're going from the intellectual understanding, first of all, and then we take it to an emotional level. I know I should be meditating now and lead you this emotional level, but I spent a lot of time answering questions, and I want to get a little bit further through the text. So I hope it's okay. You could, after this class, after you logged off, you could take the time. I mean, make the time. Bring this onto an emotional level. As Holiness the Dalai Lama always tells us this. Our great lamas always tell us this. First, you intellectually understand it, but then you bring it to your own situation and understand that situation that is described here. Okay. Anyway, therefore, as it says here, to understand liberation, it is essential to recognize this causal chain initiated by the root ignorance that give rise to the other afflictions, contaminated karma, and the resulting types of suffering. You need to truly understand this. But then there's a process out of it. Simply because the root ignorance. So again and again, I stress this. This is where it all starts. Now, how can this process be reversed? After understanding the causal sequence regarding the first two truths, so now we know how we got into the mess. Now we need to understand how we get out of the mess. The next step is to comprehend the second process, how the truth of the path, the direct realization of emptiness, gives rise to the truth of cessation, liberation from the afflictive obstructions, and thus how the root ignorance can be removed from our mental continuum. This understanding arises from recognizing that the root ignorance is a wrong consciousness. Very important, right? We need to understand that mind is not reliable. If I, for instance, perceive, let's say, there's a traffic light, right? I'm driving at high speed towards a traffic light. It's actually red, but I perceive it as green. Then my eye consciousness that perceives a green traffic light while the light is actually red, that's a wrong consciousness. It potentially harms me. I need to recognize that it's a wrong consciousness. So in a similar way, it's a mind not grounded in reality. Here, in the case of the root ignorance that perceives inherent existence, it's not grounded in reality, but it stands in direct opposition to it. Because phenomena are exactly the opposite. They lack inherent existence. So perceiving phenomena as inherently existent, you stand in direct opposition to reality. Because in fact, they lack such existence. So it's not just a little bit off, but you perceive the opposite of what's there. Realizing that the mental consciousness apprehending inherent existence, that is the root ignorance, is a wrong consciousness, involves understanding that it is mistaken with respect to its principal object, inherent existence, right? So what does it mean to understand it's mistaken? Well, I need to know that it's mistaken with regard to its main object. For instance, my eye consciousness perceiving the traffic light as green, when it's in actuality red, what is the main object? A green light. That doesn't exist. It's red. It appears as if it was green, but that green traffic light doesn't exist. That's the principal object. So it's mistaken with regard to the green light. So I need to understand that the green light doesn't exist. I need to understand that doesn't exist in order to understand it's a wrong consciousness. So similarly here, in order to understand that the root ignorance is mistaken, that the inherent existence, that it's mistaken with regard to perceiving inherent existence, I need to understand emptiness. I need to understand that phenomena lack inherent existence, right? I need, just as with the traffic light, in order to understand that my eye consciousness perceiving the green traffic light is mistaken, I need to know that there is no green light. Once I understand there is no green light, I know that my eye consciousness perceiving the red traffic light as green is mistaken. In the same way, if I perceive myself, which lacks inherent existence, if I perceive the self that lacks inherent existence as having inherent existence, well, in order to understand that it's mistaken, that mind is mistaken, I first need to know that there is no inherent existence, that my mind lacks inherent existence. So in order to understand that my mind is mistaken, my root ignorance, perceiving the self to be inherently existent, to understand that this is mistaken, I need to know first that the self lacks inherent existence. Then I know, oh, my mind that perceives inherent existence is mistaken, right? Which is therefore, so we need to know that so in order to remove the root ignorance, we need to first understand that the root ignorance is not grounded in reality, that it's a mistaken mind, and for that we need to know emptiness. Without comprehending that inherent existence is impossible, we cannot discern that the root ignorance, we cannot understand that the root ignorance is mistaken in the way it perceives phenomena to exist. Such a realization is akin to recognizing that an eye consciousness perceiving a rainbow as solid and tangible is a wrong consciousness, for it requires the understanding that such a solid and tangible rainbow does not exist. So when we look at the rainbow and it seems solid and tangible, well, to know that this is an optical illusion, I first need to know that such a rainbow doesn't exist, right? So that's why we need to know emptiness, because in order to know that the root ignorance can be removed, I need to know that it has no foundation in reality, right? It's just a figment of my imagination. I mean, to use this kind of term, it's just made up. It doesn't exist in reality. And so for that, I first need to know that there is no inherent existence. So once we comprehend that the root affliction is a wrong consciousness, we come to recognize that it can be eliminated. We realize that it can be removed by a mind that stands in direct opposition to it. For instance, give you another example. If you believe there is a thief in your house, a snake in your bed, a poisonous snake. If you believe there's a snake under your blanket and there's fear, right? There's an emotional response. Oh, there's a snake in my bed, in my shoes, in my clothes. Well, that's a wrong consciousness if there is no snake. How can I remove that wrong consciousness? By checking. Oh, there's no snake. If I know there is no snake, when I perceive the non-existence of the snake in my shoes, then the mind is gone that grasps onto a snake in my shoes, right? This is simple as that. So similarly here, once I understand that that phenomena don't exist inherently, then that mind can eliminate the grasping onto inherent existence. But here, it's not enough to simply know this conceptually, because our root ignorance, different from my wrong perception of a snake in the shoes, which is just temporarily arises, for a few hours, it's there, so it's easily removed. but our root ignorance has been with us since beginning this time. It is so deeply ingrained in our mind, even on a subtler level. It operates at all times. So just simply conceptually understanding there's no inherent existence will not free us from that. Therefore, we need a very powerful understanding of emptiness, which is a direct realization of emptiness. So that mind, the wisdom directly realizing the lack of inherent existence, which is accompanied by profound concentration, a very deep, intense level of concentration, free from any mistaken appearances, and that aligns with the minds that pertain to the method aspect of the path, such as love, compassion, and so forth. That is the mind that can remove the root ignorance. Does that make sense? Maybe I explained too much. Many of you probably know this, but just to get a better feel for this, to get a better feeling for that. So in essence, we must realize emptiness, or the lack of inherent existence, which leads to the understanding that the root ignorance is a wrong consciousness, right? Knowing there's no snake, then I can understand that my perception of the snake is unreliable. As here, the root ignorance is a wrong consciousness, as it's mistaken with regard to its main object, inherent existence, which does not exist. Once we comprehend this, we come to recognize that the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness is the direct antidote to the root ignorance, as it is the exact opposite of this ignorance in terms of what it perceives, and through its deep degree of concentration and direct experience of its object, it eliminates the root ignorance. With this recognition, we can understand liberation is possible. Liberation from the afflictive obstructions caused by the root ignorance is possible. Right? Does that make sense?
Why is it mistaken and not wrong?
Pardon?
Why is
it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's mistaken. It's both. It's wrong. I said here, root ignorance is a wrong consciousness. So it's mistaken and wrong both. It's wrong. Yeah. I should rather use the word wrong. But mistaken with regard to its main object is the same. Well, no, not really. I mean, yeah. So it's wrong. I should say it's wrong with regard to its main object. Yeah, mistaken is probably, it's not enough, actually. I should change this. It's not just mistaken in terms of how it appears. It's completely wrong in that it doesn't even exist. But that was Leora, right? Leora, was that your question? I thought it was, I recognized her voice. Okay. Now, this we really need to feel. We need to really understand this. Apply it again to our own life, to our own situation, to our own root ignorance. Take examples and understanding it's simply wrong. Its object doesn't exist. Therefore, it can be eliminated. It has no foundation in reality. In fact, it's in contradiction. The way it perceives its object, it's in contradiction also to love, compassion, kindness, and so forth. While the opposite, the mind that realizes emptiness, it aligns with these states of mind. That's why emptiness and compassion, they work perfectly together. They support each other. Okay, great. Okay, so that should be it. That's enough for today. Then enlightenment, well, we talk about the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of the Mahayana. Usually we talk about the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of the just in general, but they refer to from the point of view of the fundamental vehicle. But they're also the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of the universal vehicle. And those we need to discuss next time. Okay, great. All right, let's take a short moment to, of course, use the power of our own mind to dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated today. May, of course, enable us to, or become a cause for us to eliminate all mental obstructions, afflictive and cognitive, to actualize our fullest potential, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. But may also our positive potential, cause, of course, our great lamas, our great masters who embody the teachings, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other great lamas still alive, still around us, to live long and healthy lives and continue to guide us through their words and their examples. And of course, may all the positive potential we accumulate together, have accumulated together, cause all those 101 people captured to be released now. And may it, of course, cause the end of this war, the end of suffering on both sides, and of all other wars and conflicts in this world. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayer, the prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chinrizik, Denzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right. Thank you very much, and see you again next week.
Thank you, Geshe-ma. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Geshe-ma.
much. Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Jimmy,
you, DFI.
Varda,
Thank you,
your
DFI.
question will be next week. It's okay? Or you want, or it was, okay, what she answers.
You are trying.
Varda?
זה מחוק, מחקתי.
Okay, you don't need Jimmy?
No, thank you.
Okay,
It
thank
was
you, everyone.
And thank you.
the name of the world. That's all.